So boobs, those of you who know the lore know that I am technically a bangsa Johor. Perhaps a fake bangsa Johor though at the very least I can tell you what kacang pool is. That is my bangsa Johor spirit. Anyway, lots of drama with the Johor state elections, not least the Rosmah slot featuring Ngako Ming just the other day. I follow it on and off. Honestly been kind of distracted by my little forays into the tech world recently. What with building World Glass and also, by the way, Slapmania. Yup.
Totally free, completely in your browser. I'll be expanding it later, but slapmania.org.
By the way, I'm basically far from a Johor supremacist, but since we're on that topic,
And since this guy's been getting some flack,
here's a question we might ask. Is Khairy Jamaluddin a racist? So boobs, if you listen to some influencers, including, by the way, my actual friends, people are veering dangerously close to that assessment. Article here on Malaysia Kini saying that KJ labels Harapan's Green Wave campaign as Islamophobic, to which some people respond by saying, Masuk balik UMNO sudah lihat kegilaan ekstremism beliau, paklah menyesal ada menantu macam beliau. Nice little word glass demonstration here, by the way. And then we have our academic friend James, who has appeared on podcasts a couple of times by now, who speaks about how this is the real KJ. Because of what KJ said in relation to the Negeri Sembilan situation, a la Malay rights in Negeri Sembilan would have been at risk if not for UMNO, to which people have responded in a bunch of different ways, including Anthony Lop, Tilian Ke, Mini Anwar, and I suppose a whole bunch of people out there screaming, snake, 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 and putting out this picture again and again. I think this is one of those times when you need to actually look at the evidence. But frankly, Sapoops, reading the article, but somehow I'm not
able to see how the contents of the article directly connect to the premise that the journalists are trying to establish. Like, was he actually saying that Malay rights would be at risk?
And again, I'm somehow not surprised because, I mean, for one thing, you have to kind of remember that when people write articles, usually they'll focus on like that 1% of what a person said that is the most controversial, the most divisive, the thing that gets the very most clicks. Now, I'm sure a lot of you would go out and say that inside him, he surely is horrible. Everybody knows that he's a snake, fourth floor boy. But really though, you can't just go based on feeling. You have to actually look at what a person says or does not say. If you actually wanted to say that he was a racist, if you had proof for that, then yeah, you can go right ahead and make that claim. If you have the tolerance for it, you can say that he is. But personally, I don't think we have enough evidence to conclude that.
Basically, I'm not going to conclude he's a racist just on the basis of very thin evidence and people's assessment of his reputation. And no, how can you prove he's not a racist is not an argument.
I feel like the whole KJ issue really boils down to this, that a lot of us in Malaysia think that the moment you start speaking about so-called Malay rights, then surely you are a racist, surely you are part of the old guard, surely we have to move beyond that. And when people cannot pin down anything, then they go all the way back to the original sin, that UMNO is a race-based party, it is racist, it is horrible, why can't you just be Malaysians first? Let me say outright that I do not like race-based parties. I loathe the idea of people screaming agama bangsa, agama bangsa, agama bangsa all day and all night as if they have nothing better to do. Like, it would be way better if people just spoke for Malaysians in general. But I think it's also a fact that from the beginning of Malaysia's history, you had different communities and these people had different interests. And those differences don't just automatically go away just because you're out of the age of colonialism, like they are still there. Personally, if I were KJ, I don't think it would be irrational for me to say that I should campaign for the Malays, to the extent that the Malays view themselves as a united group of people, or that they have so-called common interests. And so in a way, you could say that if KJ is just supporting that playbook and supporting what the Malays want, I don't know if that's racist or if that's just advocating for your community group and what they need because they feel like they are a they, which itself can be a psychological reality for how people see themselves.
So to a very limited degree, I think it makes sense to advocate for the Malay community.
You know, to be fair, we had a bad experience with the whole Akmal sorry not enough a la sock issue. To which incidentally, KJ did once say, Akmal, you've made your point. Now it's time to stand down. Only to later in a move that some of you might say is a snake move, saying that, whoops, Akmal was actually necessary. Now I find that interesting, because I'm sure some of you remember that I had a chat with Akmal just a while ago about how, at the end of the day, you have to jaga sensitivity masyarakat. He's not necessarily thinking in terms of what the Malays need to do, more of like what he things that the Malay people want. And if they gonna trigger, then he has to speak out.
So yeah, these people may not actually have a deep vision for the Malays. They may actually just be following along. Oh, and these guys are much worse.
The fact is that there are some people who happen to have the same skin color who happen to think that because they have the same skin color, same religion, etc., therefore they have a common interest. And I feel like politicians are basically trying to serve that particular demographic of people. I don't think it's irrational for them to do that because there are a lot of people who are captivated by this whole race, religion, gaslighting stuff, wherever it is that you go.
Which is what a lot of these guys do as they endlessly complete for the Malay vote. And the psychophants try to say that everybody who doesn't agree is a barwa.
We don't want to assume that Malay people don't have any agency over what they want to become. I think it's very hard for you to speak for millions of people as if you represent their voice, especially given how split they are. I don't feel like anybody should define what the Malays want. Not even the Malays, by the way. It doesn't matter if you're Mahathir, Muhyiddin, Akmal, or by the way, Khairy, Jamaluddin himself. And I feel like we have to reckon with that diversity. Rather than try to keep gaslighting, manipulating people and putting them into boxes, I really wish that people would just stop with the whole agama bangsa thing. But I think it's just one attempt of many. For what I feel is an ever weakening political classification. And I think that if it really died out, then more of us can stop pretending like it's something that matters, at least compared to a lot of the other important things in life, like being able to feed yourself, being able to survive, being able to thrive in this world, which I think is a lot more meaningful than all the race and religion gaslighting that politicians take part in because they feel that other people are going to get an advantage if they don't do it in the first place. But yeah, end of the day, I don't think you're a racist just for saying that you want to speak up for Malay people or speaking up for the lived experience of being a Malay person, rojak as it may be. But I'm sure a lot of you have some very strong opinions, so let it out. What do you think? Is KJ a racist? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. That's all I'll say about that, and bye.